Good afternoon. My name is Sandy So CBC. I am one of the founder at Kui Studios, one of the directors. Kui Studios is an open innovation lab helping large enterprises solve problems using emerging technologies. Those are usually developed by our startup partners. So today we are here talking about rethinking digitization. I am not here alone. I'll introduce my co-pilot shortly. I am with Ashley Singh, whom I met many years ago, probably 3, 4 years ago when he was still at Old Mutual Insure. And he is with us today. He's currently the CIO at Sanlam Corporate. And then I'm with Rapalang, who I also met quite a few years ago, back in my 20 days. And she's with the Kindle, she's the founder, and I'm with Alvin, who is part of the Kubi family, and he recently joined us about 3 to 4 months ago, and I met Alvin, recently actually. So yeah. So thank you for joining us today. We're talking about rethinking digitization. And so I wanted to set the context of where we are right now. So there was a survey done by Oxford African Business Group, and the findings there were that 48% of CEOs believe that their firms are significantly responding by doing innovative solutions, allowing operations to resume and continue to run smoothly. So the impression is that companies are investing. One of our polls will ask you to just like support that statement or to file that statement and tell us if your organization is supporting or is investing significantly in digitization. Um, just and just in terms of the context, so we're currently in COVID-19 pandemic. I know that it's moving out in South Africa, but lo and behold, some European countries are actually in their second wave. We are in the it's all the speakers in this call mute. I don't know if there's interference in the background of sorts. Okay. So what's been happening is it's forced us to become innovative, as you have seen. The case studies I want to bring to the table is Ghana's delivering medical supplies using drones. Nigeria is really adopting digital platforms to ease logistics. As you know, Nigeria is a very high congested city with lots of cars, lots of traffic. So they're using platforms to ease the load off the roads. And Tunisia is using robots to impose lockdown rules. So that's some interesting things that have come out of this era that we're in. And I've already spoken about how a lot of CEOs feel like they're responding to the crisis with investing significantly in digitization. And so the drivers at play, as you've seen, financial services. We saw at the beginning of lockdown, Old Mutual launching an app that they probably have been working on for a while, but there was no pressure to have one. But when lockdown hits, they ramped up development on that, and they have the app delivered. Education, we're seeing a lot of remote learning. Your kids are probably also remote learning, doing online learning. And maybe Rapalang will share more insights around that. Just a lot of drivers around technology, retail. We've seen the delivery of goods to your homes becoming quite a trend in retail. So Korea guys are very happy right now because there's really an upsurge in that space. So that's just the context. And so what we're trying to discuss today is, I mean, as much as we want to digitize all things, what things do we not digitize? And maybe also like what plan do we need to have in place before we even embark on a digitization journey? And what potholes, what speed bumps lie ahead along the digitization journey. This is maybe a topic that's old for some, but maybe a topic that's new for some, because we know that not everyone is convinced about digitization at this point in time. Not the respondents are still 50%, 53%, 48%. It's not as high as it should be. I, for one, think it should be about 80%. So we know it's not everyone. So we'd like you just to learn from you and also share our thoughts and ideas. So I am going to go off screen now, but my voice will still be here. Rapalang will join. We are using a startup platform called Demio. So they're still also like in development beta phase, but it's serving the purpose. And so it's just nice that we're using a different platform, supporting another enterprise, and hopefully, it will grow the platform even further. So that is it from me, Sandiso. And then I will just ask let Rapalang join, and then I will start the conversation. Thanks. I've got a question. My first question is the South African innovation system or digitization ecosystem adequately supporting, this journey that we're on? One of the things that comes to mind is that before COVID-19, a Vodacom and Discovery had actually developed a virtual reality consultation application that was not allowed to be used in the market just based on health regulation and rules around that. And we saw that app immediately when lockdown started. Department of Health, there was a policy enabled to allow them to actually start virtual consultations. And so for me, that means that there is some sort of support, but is it adequate enough, I guess, is the question to the floor. And any of my speakers may take the question, and also please do introduce yourself at this point in time. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So it's actually staying outside of corporate. Thank you for your views for having me here. So I don't believe as a country and as companies we are doing enough to share across. I think we are still quite siloed in our digital journey. So each company looks at how they can improve their offering digitally. But I think the digital to be truly broader and to be truly effective, you need to look at a digital ecosystem. That requires investment from multiple players. So an example that could be opening up your TransUnion calls for straight-through processing. So when you go to the to get your ID done, a straight-through API to the TransUnion to get your data. So it's a much more faster process. The same with the e-commerce companies. The calls that they use for various APIs are very siloed and not open up across. So I think South African economy can do much more if we leverage of opening up our ecosystems to interact more fully together.
Other speakers, are you able to hear Ashley clearly? Because I'm struggling a bit.
Yeah, I'm also struggling a little bit. Gets a bit muffled.
Yes. So actually, because come close to your speaker, and then Rapelang, whilst you're on, if you can just respond to that question, and then Alvin, you can go next.
Sure. I think that when I first saw your stat around more companies using technology to improve their operations and resume, the first thing that came to mind is that we cannot actually assume that a company's current strategy and business is viable in the long term. So I often think that the first question should be, is this business model actually viable in the long term? Otherwise, if it's not, there's not much point in investing in it and improving those operations. And I think we need to start at that conversation so that you know that if you're going down digital enablement and transformation, that you are still with a business model that is viable in the foreseeable future. The other big thing that I think we still have to really get right in sort of corporate and public sector even is that a lot of the time we still focus on our core or business strategy. And while there's some tech or innovation happening out there, it's still seen as separate to the core business strategy. It's almost as if, leaders see the core business strategy as the serious stuff and the innovation tech stuff as the nice things that we can add in if, time and budget allows. And we haven't fully appreciated yet that the technology is actually the enabler that gets you to your core business strategy results. And when we get that mind shift sort of further along the line, then I'll be more convinced that as a country, we're moving fast along.
Thank you. Alvin?
Yes, I'm actually going to latch on the point that my colleague raised, which is around the business model. I think it's very key that businesses start reassessing their business model before starting to invest in technology. It's very key. And another point that I just want to clarify, sort of different point from on the technology perspective, is that technology is an enabler. However, what we have seen so far is that technology is detecting the investment into digitization, which is actually the wrong step to take. First, the business need to detect the digitization. It's a business conversation and then enabled by technology. So it's key that the business actually finds the viability of technology, or rather of digitization, and then identify the right technology that will drive that business decision. And what we've seen in the market is that we almost react to technology. They say, oh, now there's blockchain, or now there's robotics. What can we do in our company? But rather, look at the company, look at our operating model, look at the things that we're doing now and how we can make effective and efficient in our processes before we look at actually technology. And then we say, okay, which technology can drive that business decision? So I think that's a great point that I just wanted to take on. Thank you.
Just on that, Alvin, if you could just speak about digital trends that we're seeing in the market right now. You can speak about the ones that are more current in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, or the ones that you feel like are actually going to be emerging in the next. Because I feel like we're going to be in this state probably for another 2 years if we just base the health pandemic on previous health pandemics. We expect about it 2 to 3 years. I'd say not so much economic activity. And so what trends are we going to start seeing in the market, or what trends are at play at this current moment?
Thanks, Sandy. That's a great question. So what we've seen trending in the market a lot is this whole move from having a call center agent into having a more virtual assistant. Unfortunately, that has driven lots of job losses within the call center industry. However, what actually that has done is it has enabled companies to be able to reach out or able to service their customer in the large volumes and obviously more effectively, more efficient with very minimum resources invested. So, banks, as an example, they've reduced their number of contact with customers. We've seen a lot of banks shutting down their doors and investing more into online platforms. And now, we've seen, technologies such as WhatsApp coming in and, helping, in conjunction with other technology like robotics to actually create a virtual agent. Now, when you go on, you don't need to call DSTV to reset your password, to correct an error. You just go on WhatsApp and then say, this is my decoder, and then it's solved. And what I think the key thing that that is interesting, that they've actually used WhatsApp, which is something that people can relate to already, to create the virtual agent. And that actually is the way to go, not to create something new, but use a platform that people are already using to actually enable interaction with customers. So I think that's a point that I would like to share.
Yeah. Actually, for you, I think all the examples that Alvin has alluded to speak to financial services, virtual agents, call centers. That is mostly financial services is largely affected by this, and your response to that is a digital trend. And what other trends are you seeing in your sector? Not really.
I'm just switching over to different mics. So maybe hold on a second. Sorry about that.
Sandy, so just to add on what Alvin mentioned there around the focus around customers, I think that one of the sort of ways I think about it is that traditionally companies were optimizing around revenue and costs. And now we're seeing that there's sort of two additional dimensions. And I like to look at it as sort of 4 quadrants, where there's also now about improving that customer experience, like the WhatsApp experience Alvin mentioned, but also enhancing the employee experience and engagement. So it's now sort of 4 big areas that we're using digital transformation for: revenue, cost sort of reduction, customer experience, and employee engagement.
Yeah, that's so true. It's actually changed the scale a bit. I see that. Actually, I hadn't realized that. So that's such a great point. Ashley, can you respond now?
Yes.
Let's just give it a try.
Yes. So I think on the financial services industry, I think there's still a big focus on running straight through processing. So as you know, for financial processes, many handoffs, it's still quite a large paperwork driven. How can we enable that to be more automated, more straight through, even considering you've got an archaic backend system or you've got different systems? How can you enable more straight through processing? And there's a big drive to enable that. That will enable the cost efficiencies we spoke about. But regarding the warm touch and the call center agents that we've spoken about and the WhatsApp, I mean, that is great, and that is something we are pushing. But there's still a large maturity level of digital users in the South African economy that prefer a warmer touch. So initially, certain companies went completely self-service, if you would, and had to reach out there and have some sort of warm touch. Similarly, some banking institutions are actually putting in physical kiosks or physical systems at various grocery stores to enable people to be more self-sufficient, but with a terminal at hand. Because not everyone has grasped onto the WhatsApp that easily. Not everyone, from a community perspective, has the Wi-Fi or the bandwidth. There's also something such as reverse billing. So when they do have the bandwidth, how do we pay for their data, enable them to use the self-services, to use the digital technologies as well? So as much as there may be solutions, we need to find what's fit for purpose for the larger economy as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I see both Alvin and Rabilang are nodding. I don't know who wants to go first. And in your response, can you just tell me like what companies should probably avoid digitization just based on whether it's external environments or internal environments? I think that's quite important to speak about as well. Alvin? Are you on mute?
Sorry. Thanks, Sandy. So actually, you're quite right. There's obviously some fundamental infrastructure limitations that can actually hinder the companies from expanding their digitization journey, specifically when they consider the market, they consider the customers. You obviously want to digitize as much as possible, but you need to understand who are your customers. For instance, recently Shoprite has introduced the extra card. However, the extra card, is more prevalent. This is more prevalent in the middle class market, and what we've seen that they have a different approach to the other Shoprite franchise, which is more lower class market, which is a Shoprite, not Checkers, but Shoprite. They have a different approach there. So they are digitizing, but they are also cognizant of their customer base, that how do we digitize? Do we digitize fully, or do we digitize in some brands or some sort of our offering? So it's very key to understand the customer and the offering and how the end customer actually will be able to interact with the technology. It's unfortunate that if you don't do that, you invest a lot of money, but you have little, adoption of that technology, and then you realize later that this technology didn't actually help the company. So that's very key. That's a key point, Ashley.
Rabilang, over to you.
Sure. I think that the best way to sort of avoid just throwing technology out there because it's sort of trendy and it's popular is to make sure that you come back to the question of what constraints are you trying to break when you implement this technology, and diving into the customer's pain and customer's problem, as opposed to having a technology that is chasing and looking for a problem. And if you start with the question of what is the constraints the customer or the employee or the end user is experiencing right now, and how can we use technology to break that constraint, then you're thinking about it in the right path, because ultimately that's what technology was designed for. And if you find that users are not adopting a new solution, you were probably not breaking a constraint they really had. And it was just sort of a nice thought or idea that they needed to, push out because you needed to sort of look innovative. I mean, I'm quite key on pushing the thinking that way. When we look at our environment, what assumptions and constraints are actually holding us back from optimal performance?
Ashley, on that, what are you not digitizing in financial services?
So I think good point, and I think it leads to the point of growing technology as a solution. So I think what we're not digitizing is we're not trying to throw an app for everything. We're not trying to give you an app for your insurance, an app for your investments. We're trying to consolidate that. So when we look at a particular product scheme and a particular digital strategy, it's not to throw tech, not to throw another app at it. I think there's a lot of app fatigue in the global economy and certainly in the South African economy. And how can we consolidate, come up with a sound digital strategy that gives the customer a particular digital play that's brand wide, not just segmented within a massive brand such as Sanlam, and have that offering. So to answer your question, we're not digitizing components, but we're looking at digitizing the whole. and giving the customer one digital experience rather than multiple.
Thank you. And just this is probably the last question, and it really is around the role of startups in the digitization journey for large enterprises, corporations, governments. What are we seeing? What is their role? What should they do? And I'd like Ashley to start first because he's the big corporate giant here, and then we'll go through this more.
And we also have, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but we do have a lot of processes. We do have a lot of architectural discussions and boards that we're too busy to get ratified in. And I think what startups and fintech can bring to the party is an agility, whereas they can bring a solution much faster to prototype phase than some of the corporates can. They can partner with technologies that the big corporates are scared to do so because of the security implications, or we haven't vetted the cybersecurity vetted of it as yet. Smaller companies can do that much quicker. They can vet that. They can create the POCs. They can fail much faster than bigger corporates, and just to really show us some pure innovation, to think outside the box.
Thank you. Alvin, you are muted, so just unmute yourself and then respond, please.
So I think the role of startups is very key in digital transformation. Firstly, the nimbleness in which they can bring to a big corporate in terms of transformation. That's one of the strongest point. It's so easy to think about transformation as a huge, large transformation journey, but it's made up of small incremental improvements into a process. And what I've experienced, having worked in small and large sort of providers for this solution, that it's easier to work with smaller players in the market, because then they have the nimbleness to jump into a small POC, show value quickly, and be able to then run small projects to that, without the company having to invest in a whole large end-to-end enterprise sort of transformation. And again, what I've seen also is that the small players actually have a better business case in terms of these transformation projects. I would say that for every transformation project in digital, it needs to be supported by a business case. And if there's no business case, you shouldn't invest in it. And it's easier to sort of manage a business case with a smaller player because of the cost element that comes with it. And that's where then becomes key to say, how do you then make it happen so quickly and with the smallest investment that you can possibly put in the investment. Thank you.
No, thank you. Just for the audience, if you'd like to ask any questions, I'm going to give like 2 minutes, and then Rapelang, please respond to the. Rapelang is the startup in the room, actually. So, just tell us the challenges you have with working on large implementations and large enterprises, so people in the audience can actually learn as well. Thank you.
Sure. I think my colleagues did really put down a number of good points. And when we look at the concept of an ecosystem, it only works when there's multiple stakeholders really driving it and contributing. Given that most of the time when companies do design a digital strategy, there's always going to be an internal gap in certain digital skills that need to be filled quickly. And this is where, much like you, Sandiso, I'm a big believer in digital collaboration to help fill that gap and that connection between startups and corporates. But more importantly, from the startup perspective, is that for African innovations to truly succeed, we actually need local consumption, local buying of local innovations. And we can't keep relying on leaving corporates to sort of buy the big international and Western platforms that they then sort of deploy locally. Very often we'll hear that there's no budget to invest in or use local innovations. But when you look at the price tags of some of the mega platforms that corporates are rolling out, there's really no justification for that. And yet we still want to be an Africa that produces innovative solutions, that owns its IP. And none of that happens without the local market buying local innovation.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the audience. I really appreciate it. There will definitely be a point of view on this topic, and you'll learn more about it in weeks to come. Thank you for joining, and we hope you will join us next week. Yeah, have a good afternoon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.